I've been quality manager. I've had this continuous improvement hat. I've been a program manager, a Baldrige examiner. I help facilitate the strategic planning process here at IDN. In past lives, before coming to the donation community, I did do fundraising for a women's health nonprofit, and I worked in HR at a large clinic system. So I come with a lot of different experience. I feel like I'm a true liberal arts education person with my background and just picking up pieces here and there. So I'm really excited to share our experience today.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm super pumped that I get the chance to talk about it with Jen, because it's been an exciting journey. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Burgmeyer, Executive Director of IQC, and I've done a bunch of different things you can read there on the screen. But it's wonderful to see some names that I know and have met either recently or as I look through all the participants, I'm like, oh, cool. I think I've met or talked with all of you at some point in the last few years. So it's exciting to be here.
All right, well, I'm going to start us off by just telling you a little bit about Iowa Donor Network and who we are, what we do. We are the organ and tissue donation agency for the state of Iowa. So our role is to be the federally designated organ procurement organization, and we are tissue recovery agency. So we work with hospitals and other healthcare partners like medical examiners and EMS providers and so forth, all across the state of Iowa to facilitate the donation process. So when someone has the opportunity to become a donor, we are contacted and we support donor families through the decision and facilitate the recovery of organs and tissues. One of the other things that our organization has the pleasure to do is to manage the Iowa Donor Registry. So when you say yes on your driver's license to donation, that information comes to IDN so that we can include you in our registry. And at the time that donation may be possible, we check that so that we can make sure that your donation decision is honored at the time of your death. So it's a great thing to be able to do, and we're very proud to say that Iowans are very giving community, and that about 77% of us have registered to say yes to donation, which is fantastic. We do have offices both in the North Liberty area, which is outside of Iowa City, for those who aren't just familiar, and Altoona, which is in our Des Moines area. And of course, we work with hospitals and in hospitals across the state to do this. We also partner very closely with the Iowa Alliance Eye Bank, which is the agency that helps with facilitate cornea and eye donation in the state of Iowa. Next slide. So we just have to share a little bit, pat ourselves on the back, and recognize the wonderful gifts that have been given in the state of Iowa in 2020, and we did actually have a record year with the number of lives transformed through organ and tissue donation. We had 300 organs that were recovered and transplanted from over 100 organ donors in the state, and we had 886 tissue donors who donated the gifts of bone and skin, veins, and heart for valves. We are very grateful for these donors and the families who said yes to donation, because they truly do transform the lives of recipients who receive these gifts. I also want to point out that we have experienced quite a bit of growth over the past 5 years. As you can see here, we've seen an 87% increase in organ donation since 2016, and we've seen an increase in the number of organs transplanted, 75% increase in organs transplanted in the past 5 years. And as you can imagine, with that growth comes growing pains. It's things to celebrate, absolutely, and we are very pleased with this progress, but it also has represented some challenges, or presented some challenges to us as an organization as we work to meet this need of recovering organs for transplant and tissues for transplantation. Next slide. So that kind of brings us to the purpose of the talk that we have here today, which is to really talk about why it's important to have a focus on strategy. And, I really appreciated the keynote this morning because she touched a little bit on this in a few different ways. And I think about a road trip, she talked about that's part of what their brand is. And if you can think about it, when you go on a road trip, it's helpful to have a map. You know where you're starting from and you may know where you're going. But you need that vision to know where you're going, and the map can help you get there. And I think a strategic plan can work much in that same way. It helps you to have a clear vision of where you are. How are you meeting your customer, your stakeholder, your partner needs currently? What is new and different that they need? What's happening in your environment? That's all going to impact where you're going to go in the future. And the strategy and the plan helps you to develop that roadmap to get you where you want to go in the future. I think the process of strategic planning also helps you to identify what you do best. And again, I think of Stephanie's presentation this morning, and I really liked it when she said, figure out what's special and unique about you and leverage that. I really, really like that because I think knowing what you are good at helps you figure out how you can execute and deliver what your customers need and have sustainable growth for your organization. And so I think that's great. And, for us, it really is, having strategy is about having the conversation of what we need to do now to build IDN for the future. How do we create a sustainable organization that's positioned for growth the way we need it to grow to meet our mission and vision? Next. So, that's all great, and it's very aspirational and wonderful and kind of feels like a rah-rah moment, but then you kind of have to step back and you have to figure out how to do that. Like, wait a minute, how do we make this strategy? And not only that, how is it that we actually put it into action? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about in the next few slides. So as long as I've been, you can go ahead to the next one. As long as I've been at IDN, I think there's always been some form of strategy and a strategic plan. And one of the things, we are one of the organizations that does participate in the Iowa Recognition for Performance Excellence program, or IRPE program. And for those of you who are familiar with the Baldrige criteria that the program utilizes, there's a lot of talk about strategy and how you make those strategic decisions and decide what's important and where you're going to focus. And as we've been more involved in using the Baldrige criteria, we have become more focused in trying to create more discipline around this process. And over time, we've experienced different challenges, quite honestly. For us, at points in time, we would have one big event. We'd have a big strategic plan retreat. We'd all get excited when we make lots of plans. We would develop a strategy and we would do lots of things at it. And it was both exciting and kind of tiring. And then we had this document and we didn't always know what to do with it after we left. So the plan kind of, I don't want to say became dusty, because we did look at it, but we didn't have a great process in place to figure out how to be agile with it and make adjustments as we needed to. I think we also had different times where we did a good job of saying, this is how we're going to take that strategy and put it into action. And other times when that didn't happen so much. And hi, sorry, my computer screen went black for a minute. Am I still with you all?
Yep, you're good.
Woohoo, okay. I just had a moment of panic, but it all went black. But picking up on that, we did struggle with moving from plan to action. I think the other thing that happened for us at different points is that we didn't always have clarity. We weren't clear on who was going to take that action, and there wasn't joint accountability and ownership. Another thing that we ran in, and because of that, I don't think we were always as good as we could have been at execution of the plan. So like at the end of the year, when we looked at what we actually had done, not so great. We didn't, I think last year when we counted it up, we maybe executed on about 40% of what we had planned to. And then I think the last thing is we have learned over the years how to be better at kind of doing an environmental scan. You know, we don't exist in a vacuum, and we needed to have some growth and development around how do we figure out what's happening around us, what's happening with our hospital partners that can impact us, or our transplant programs, or our tissue processors who actually distribute the tissue that we recover. You know, what's happening for our customers. So we needed to get better at doing this environmental scan, because what impacted them impacts us, and we needed to try to have a better understanding of that so we could be agile and adjust as we needed to.
So a quick show of hands. I threw in the chat. Quick show of hands, or drop in the chat. How many of you have experienced one or more of those bullet points in your experience with a strategic plan? Not in your current organization, of course. I'm sure at a previous one that, you know. So I see some hands. I see a couple. Yep. Okay. So again, I think what's interesting to me is some of these challenges when you say, hey, this isn't quite working. This isn't that uncommon.
Thanks for making me feel better, everyone.
No problem. My whole goal today was to say, how can I make Jen feel better?
Oh, well, thank you. You know
No
what? You made my day. All right.
Okay.
So we have had a few learnings. Obviously, we are trying to be a learning organization. And when we stepped back and looked at the challenges that we were facing, we recognized that we really needed to have a plan that wasn't something we just looked at once a year, and we needed to be able to make adjustments. You know, it was all fine and good to go away, you know, do this big strategic plan retreat, but how did we pay attention to it over the course of the year and adjust as things change? You know, what things look like for us in October, which was when we did it last, may not be true now. Think of 2020 and COVID. Who would have ever predicted that was going to happen? So we had to figure out how to look at the plan more frequently and adjust. We also we recognize that strategy is a team sport. It doesn't belong to one person or the executive leadership. It really needs to involve a lot of people at the organization to get it done. We needed to check in on how we were doing. How were we executing? You know, if we weren't delivering, if we were at 40%, well, why was that? What did we need to do differently? So who is accountable, and how are we talking about the plan? So we needed to build in processes so that we had those checkpoints and could make sure we were getting things done. Another thing that we realized is it's hard to do everything all at once at that strategy retreat. And so for us, so we'll talk about later, to spend 2 days and, you know, gosh, we got to change our values. That's a lot of work to do, and to do a SWOT analysis, and to then develop the strategy. It was too much. And so we needed to develop a different way to do that work. And we'll talk about the rhythm document that we've created and have been using for the last few years to help us manage that type of work. Another thing that we recognized is we needed to do better at cycles of evaluation and improvement, and we needed to formalize those processes. And we'll talk about this a little bit more with the rhythm as well in a few slides. But we needed to check in and say, are the things that we're doing here working, and what adjustment are we going to make the next time? So we are trying to build that into our organizational rhythm and planning process too. I already talked quite a bit about we had to make changes with looking around in this environmental scan. And the last thing really was that we needed some help. We found it as an organization very challenging to say we could develop this strategy and have all of what we needed on our own internally. And so we recognized that we needed to bring in somebody to facilitate our strategic planning at the very least, and maybe help us figure out some other ways that we could pull this information together and work on execution and deployment of putting this into action. So that's one of those other key learnings that we had. So, and that's where Scott really came in to help us. We pulled him in for strategic planning starting in 2019 after we were introduced to a model, and he's helped us to refine and grow that model. And I think he's going to tell you a little bit more about that now.
Yeah. So the model that we really started with was the traction model. So if you're familiar with traction, it's the Gino Wickman book, The Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's really very, very strong to get your arms around what are some of the key things if you're going to run and lead a business. And as we kind of looked at how that process was going, we really started to refine the model and see, hey, some of the things in traction are really, really good, and we want to use some of those. But there's some other things that may help augment that to make the planning process stronger. And we'll talk about some of the things that really became important for us as we work. So we spent some time really diving into the model. We're going to talk about kind of overall the method, and then we're really going to get into here's how we went through each of those pieces using this methodology and kind of what that looks like. And so when you think about part of that is saying, what is the mission, vision, and values of the organization? What is it today? And does that need to change? And that doesn't mean we change that every week or every quarter, but we really need to have a rhythm where it's being looked at and we talk about, is this what we're trying to accomplish? And Stephanie talked about that. And I won't do I will not do Stephanie's justice, but I think it was, we want to make the road trip fun. Mm-hmm. And they refined that mission and that vision over the course of time. And that is a very natural progression for an organization. From there, then we looked at and we established some areas of excellence. Some will call it pillars. Some will say these are focus items. At the end of the day, pick words that make sense to you. It made sense that we would call them areas of excellence, and there are 3, and we'll talk about those 3 here in a moment. Your organization might have 5, might have 2. What I would tell you, probably 2 to 5 is a good number. If you have more than that, that sounds like way too giant. Once you have those areas of excellence and you can define what that means and you come to agreement on here's what each of those areas mean, then we can create some 3 to 5 year vision outcomes. Now, those statements, those outcome statements are really about saying, what does success look like 3 to 5 years from now in each of those areas of excellence? And you're getting big, hairy, audacious things that are way out there, that are like, we would be an awesome organization if we could accomplish all of those. And again, looking out more than 3 to 5 years, I don't know is helpful. Because I've yet to find an organization that a couple years ago said, hey, in 2020, we're going to have a pandemic, then we need to put that in our strategic plan. So the reality is, I'm still going to try and be this thing out there as an organization. And we have to have a way to refine that because things are going to happen. We could say, hey, shit just got real. And it just is going to happen. And you just have to plan for it. I was actually talking with someone earlier during the networking session. I think, Lisa, you might have been in that when we were chatting. And I said, I was talking with the team this morning. It's not if something is going to go wrong today, it's when. Someone's not going to be able to connect. It's going to be echoey. It's going to be whatever. And that's really the intention, is I want to say what I want to accomplish, and that's that 3 to 5 year vision outcome. Then we're going to come and say, what are we going to focus on this year or this time period? Now, we picked 3 to 5 years and we picked 1 year. You could say, I want to look at 1 year and 90 days. So it's not that 3 to 5 year and 1 year is right. It's just, that's what fit. That's what made sense to us. And then as you layer on those foundations, it's really then saying, how do we deploy it, follow up, be agile, adjust it, because we're going to have to. We might get a new regulation that comes in and it totally changes the outlook of our life and what we have to do. And when you think about several of you, as I look down the list, many of you are Baldridgen. And on the Baldridge journey, as if you think about it, the criteria really talks about, well, 2.1 says, what is your strategic planning process? What are your steps? Well, we've talked about some of those. We review the mission, vision, values. We look at the areas of excellence. What are your long-term planning horizons? Oh, 3 to 5 years. What are your short-term? 1. How do you deploy? And that's what becomes important in the strategic planning process. I would love the word planning to go away. It is a strategic process. We get so worried about the planning. There are other pieces that are more important. The plan is, I'm going to say, here's what I'm going to go do. But I have all this other stuff I need to do first before I do that. And many times we forget that.
All right, so like Scott said, doing a review and a scan, an assessment of your mission, vision, and values is an important part of the strategic planning process. And we have built in opportunities to do that in our cycle. And what I want to talk about is an experience recently. You know, we have delivered times where we are looking and saying, are these things still true to us? Is this mission, does this still make sense? Does this still align with what we are as an organization? And the same is true with the vision. And I just want to tell you a little bit about our most recent experience with our values. For our organization, we use our core values as part of our performance management process. They become our behavioral competencies. And so when we go through our performance, employee performance management assessments, we take a look at these and we are commenting on whether or not employees are living our values. And in 2019, when we were going through the cycle, and at that point we did a 6-month check-in and we also did an annual review, leaders started saying things like, you know, these values that we have, they feel weak. It's really hard to say what the anti-behavior is, or in some cases, or other times they said, you know, if this is really what we say is core to who we are, this is really basic level of entry. You know, if this is the ticket to entry here and how we're going to be with one another, it's minimal. And maybe we need to think about stepping our game up a bit if we really want to be a high performing organization that serves our donors, our donor families, and works to meet our mission and our vision. And so at our strategic planning retreat in 2019, when Scott joined us, we took the time to step back as a senior leader team, which for us is our officers and our director level leaders. And we did a lot of brainstorming. You know, Scott challenged us to think about what is above the line behavior and what is below the line behavior. And we, as a group, brainstormed quite a bit of what that looked like and continued that work over the course of our day together, one of the 2 days that we had together. And through you know, brainstorming, through affinity diagramming or affinity groupings and things, a lot of those CI tools that many of us use, we actually came away with some kind of a rough draft, if you will. You know, we did some wordsmithing. We walked away with what we thought were our core values, our new core values, and what they meant to us. And we didn't just leave it there and say, okay, this is it and we're going to implement it. We actually took it back to our organization. We have a manager level leadership group as well. So we took it to our manager level folks for feedback. And we also got together a staff level task force to get feedback from them. And actually, they had quite a few comments for us. You know, in most cases, there was a lot of connection with our words. But, you know, in some cases, there was some pretty big changes that we made. And so we went through some refinement of what those values were. And we were a little delayed in our rollout because COVID hit right about the time that we were ready to launch our new values. So we postponed for 3 or 4 months. But then we did launch these new values. And just a little aside with that, at the same time that we launched the values, we revamped our recognition program. So we had previously had a process where staff could recognize one another for living the values, demonstrating the values. And we relaunched that program with our new 4 new core values. And I think it's a testament to say that we were on the right track with the changes that we made, because in the last 4 months of 2020 with that program, the number of valuegrams that were submitted was more than all of the valuegrams had ever been submitted before. So that was really affirmation to the leadership group that we made a really good change, that we were on the right track with it. So
And
it was great.
yeah, and I think as we walked through this, I can remember that day. And actually, as I look at some of the names on the list, some of you were in that room with us that day. And I can remember words like, "This is exhausting. Are we done yet? Isn't this good enough?" and
Are you saying that we were whining?
No, I think it is. Doing this is hard work. And because it makes such an impact to people. If we don't have values that we can connect with, and this is the comment that Jen talked about, this drawing the line, that line says, we're going to hire and we're going to fire based on these values.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not arm in arm as a leadership team to say, hey, here is clear, bold, and respectful, and here's what it looks like. And Jen hinted at the anti-behavior. There's actually a document that is, here's clear, bold, and respectful, or always on, and drive and embrace the future, etc. Here's what good looks like. And then there's the anti-behavior for that value to say, when you're doing these, you're below the line and you're not living up to that value. And again, you can't hit every single thing. We know that. But what we found is that just added a level of clarity to say, now I can, as a leader, I can provide someone feedback when they're dipping their toe over in the anti-behavior. And I don't have to guess, or what Jen thinks is an anti-behavior is just vastly different than me. No, we're pretty aligned there.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes
it's
easy to then have a conversation. Go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, we just finished up our first cycle of performance management with these new values too, and we did an after action review of that process. And the feedback from managers and directors about using these and having those anti-values and the conversations that they were able to have with staff, it once again affirmed that we are on the right track. The feedback was very positive from them, and felt like they had richer and more robust conversations around above the line and below the line kind of stuff. So,
yep, awesome.
And I don't know why okay, sorry, my screen just went black again. All right, so moving on, I've kind of hinted at this a little bit already, and one of the learnings we had in 2019 after that strategic planning retreat is we crammed a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and it's hard work no matter what, but if you don't set reasonable goals for that work, it makes it even more challenging. And so after that experience, actually learning from another Baldrige winner, another organ procurement organization named Donor Alliance that's based out in Denver, and then also getting our 2019 IRP feedback report, kind of all of this came together, and we developed this idea of the organizational rhythm document. And what this is we looked at the calendar year and said, there are some things that happen all the time. They're part of our organizational rhythm, like performance management. We had a cycle of, January and July, we did our 6-month and our annual. We always did an employee engagement survey. We had key times when we did strategic planning. We had these kind of things. And so we plotted those out on the calendar. And then we said, hey, when we do strategic planning, do we actually have to do that review of the mission, vision, and values at that retreat? Do we have to identify and talk about our core competencies or our advantages and challenges at that retreat? And we decided the answer was no. And so we've plotted those things in throughout the year so that when we do come to the retreat in the fall, which is our cycle, we have already spent time affirming. We know our mission, our vision, and our values are the things we want. They are what is going to drive our work. They are going to be the thing that we hold all of our initiatives against. We know what our core competencies are. We may talk a little bit more about them to remind ourselves, but we've done the work ahead so that day when we come together, we're ready to go. The other thing that this has done for us is it's helped us to build in some evaluation for these processes and to step back and say, hey, it's been 2 months. We've just finished our performance management cycle. Hey, what worked? What didn't work with this? Hey, we just finished budgeting. How well did it go for directors to submit information? What changes do we need to make next time? What about employee engagement? Is this process really working for us? Is the tool we're using right? And so that was the feedback we got with from IRPE feedback report, was that we didn't have a formal process, a formal approach for that stuff. So this rhythm has really helped us to I think it's helped us to do a lot of things for the positive. Have those evaluation cycles, think about what we're doing, and have a calendar of events, so that we can have discipline around talking about these things. So
as we really stepped in, and again, we looked at that kind of the house model, the 3 areas of excellence that we have identified, and these have been refined over the last couple of years, is people, operational, and community. And part of that whole strategic process is to say, okay, number one, how do we describe what that area of excellence is? And then generally, what does good look like? And so we spent some time defining what that is, and you can see there on the screen. Again, community is really saying, hey, IDN is known and trusted. Now notice we haven't got super specific here, and I'll talk about why here in a moment, but it's really about saying, okay, these are those pillars, those areas of excellence that are important to us. And you're going to hear us, Jen and I, say this likely several times, is when we're doing strategy, if these are our areas of excellence, if we can't align an initiative to one of these 3 areas, we should not be doing it. And if you're like, well, but it's important, yeah, that may be an elevated conversation to say, maybe we need to make an adjustment in an area of excellence because something in the outside world is influencing that, but that is a different conversation. And so we're really purposeful as we have those conversations to say, what's that area of excellence? Now we can go down to the next level. So again, we're confirming that these are still right. Do these need to be tweaked at all? And again, I would anticipate they get refined over the course of time. And so I think community was the one that was changed last year.
Yep.
And that was some great conversation about what are we trying to communicate and how do people get connected to that and understand that easier, both at the board and the leadership team and all the staff. So we know, what are we really trying to accomplish in community? And I actually don't even remember what it was before. Now
it was market.
Yeah, it was market. And I feel so much better about community. And it's funny that I feel better about it when I'm not on the team.
I think we feel a lot better about community too. It makes a lot more sense to us. Yeah.
And so it's important that we agree and align on what are those areas of excellence or pillars, focus point, well, whatever you want to call those. Okay. Then as you kind of step forward in the process is really then to say, okay, what are those long-term actions, 3 to 5 years? Now, again, we use 3 to 5 years. You might say, I can't go out that far. I need to do 2, or I need to do 6. Whatever that long term is. And we spent time then talking about, okay, in each one of these areas of excellence, what does good look like? What is that big thing out there that we say we really want to have? You can see those 5 points in people. Now, what's important to remember is under effective organizational design, there are sub-bullet points that tease out really what that looks like and what does good look like for each one of these bullet points. So it gives us then clarity about what are we trying to accomplish with that strategy. And that's what we're rowing for. And I loved what Jen said earlier. It's really the roadmap. And if I know that's what I'm trying to accomplish, now I can be very, very focused and laser focused on what our strategy is going to do. And so you can see there is people, operational, again, increase the ability to donate, centers of excellence, data into knowledge. And then in community is all about how do we have partnerships? How do we make people aware and more aware? And I think, Jen, you said 80 some percent.
77.
77. Well, okay. Increased public awareness would say, well, maybe a strategy is I want to go from 77 to 80 or 77 to 85. And then that is in those 1-year plannings. And then philanthropy, how do we start to open up what we're doing from a giving and philanthropic perspective? Jen, would you add anything as you kind of went through, as we went through and really refined these?
I think you captured it really well. I think what good looks like, I think is important to have some clarity around that, because even now as we're working on our 1-year plan, we are talking about that, what is the success statement? And so having some, being clear about that, I think is helpful as you're looking at your strategy.
And it is important to know that then every time we do the strategic process, we're coming back to this long term and saying, okay, we updated and tweaked this in 2020. Now, what do we now know in 2021 that changes our lens for 3 to 5 years in the future? And what of these bullets need to change, or what of the definitions need to change? And it could be nothing. It could be, oh my gosh, we have to totally add another bullet in operational. And that's all based on that environmental scan. That's all based on what is going on. And so this piece, again, is an evolution that happens over the course of time. And it's always looking out a little bit. Now, Jen, there's a question in the chat about organizational rhythm. I think it makes sense to answer this now. So the question is, if we're in and something comes up and something we were supposed to do in February, we can't do, we have a hiccup, what happens?
So we did have that, last year, especially when COVID happened, we had a few things planned, like when we were going to do our employee engagement survey. We'd actually planned to launch it at the end of March, and we shut our office in mid-March, and we had conversation as a leadership team. We meet 4 times a month, or basically we meet every Tuesday, and have some type of conversation. And the leadership team stopped and said, does this make sense where we're at right now? And do we need to pivot and make an adjustment? And we decided that it didn't make sense at all for us to survey our staff in a time of such uncertainty and so many unknowns that we were experiencing. We were trying to figure out how to work remotely. We had staff who still needed to go into hospitals. There was just a lot of, we just didn't know a lot. And so the leadership team had discussion, and we made the decision to postpone. And, you know, honestly, I can't remember if we said, yes, let's postpone and circle back, or if we actually set a date. I don't recall, but with the discipline of using the organizational rhythm and the agenda cycle that we have, we circle back around to it. So it didn't just drop and go away. And I think that's part of what the power of the organizational rhythm is. I would just add to kind of that line of sight item, we have a couple of surveys that we do on, not annually. So sometimes one of them I think is every 2 years and one of them is every 3 years, different partners. And that's something we put on that too, because so many of us would be like, when are we doing that again? What was the cycle? So again, it just helps with line of sight, and it keeps the dialogue fresh for everyone.
Excellent.
I hope that answered.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that the key is it's there and it's visible, and it's part of that leadership meeting agenda, which I know we're going to talk about that meeting cadence later. But it's really then now we can have a purposeful conversation and make a decision that's best for the organization, which could be pause, which could be, you know what, we need to not do it this year, which could be, nope, we need to do it because it's a regulatory and we just got to figure out how to do it.
Yep.
So once we have created those vision statements and those definitions of success in those areas of excellence for that long term, now we go into, okay, now let's get focused on what are we going to do this year? And when we do that, we're really coming back and saying, okay, we have these areas of excellence and we have those definitions. And we talk about, again, those have to be refined, etc. And then this is where the really heavy thinking happens, because now we have to dream and we have to say, what are all the things we could do, we should do, we absolutely should do, that are going to allow us to move forward in each of these areas of excellence. And when I say we're dreaming, there is no restriction on people, on budget, on anything. Even if it's things that don't even exist today and we're making things up, we can add it to the list. And this is what happens is we restrict ourselves. This is the tendency here to say, oh, no one will let us do that. That's going to cost too much. I'm not even going to put it on. And now is not the time to do that. Now is the time to say, here are options and alternatives that would allow us to get to our long-term actions. So we're still putting some parameters on it, but it allows us to really think about what is possible and really dream about what's out there. Once we get through that cycle, and when I say we do that, imagine a room of, what do we have, 13, Jen? 13,
yep.
13 wonderful leaders. I think we identified somewhere around 500 or 600 ideas.
It was a lot of sticky notes.
It was a lot of sticky notes. I apparently should have bought stock in 3M for that day. And then we come back and we prioritize. That's when we get really, really discerning to say, what's the most important now? All of these are really cool, good ideas, something that, yep, we may want to do, but what do we need to do now that is either a predecessor of something else, or that is a burning platform and we have to do it because of regulatory whatever. We then narrow that list. And once that list is narrowed, then it's important that we get super clear on what that means. And so one of our learnings that we've really pushed into is saying, okay, we now know these are the priorities, and we have an initiation template that we actually fill this out that day. So we say, who's probably going to lead this initiative? And we say, what's a success statement and a business case for that thing that we're trying to do? Who's on the team? And when we're creating and identify team members, we're really, and this was a great learning for us, was to say, you know what, if every initiative is being led by a senior leader, we are not doing the organization and other members of the team justice. How are we developing people to future leaders if they don't get to either be a team member or lead something that is important? And we need to elevate the leaders to work on the business and not in the minutia. And this was hard because it's like, well, wait a minute, but I always get involved in that. Well, congratulations, maybe not anymore. And we then review those and they get approved by that group. And again, I think as you grow in size and as you grow in maturity, what naturally happens is there's refinement and there's review and there's approval by leadership. And there may be then a final review to say, hey, these are the 10 things we believe we want to do. And we might need to make the case to the executives to say, yes, we want to do this, and have the executive team then approve that. But the goal is coming out of that strategy process is we have a definitive number of strategic projects that we are going to focus on for the next year. And what does good look like and why are we doing it? So we have a rough go forward action, which really then links back to those 1 year areas of excellence. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think, so we left with these rough drafts basically, and we looked to make sure that, hey, these things that we said were important for us to accomplish in the next year, these success statements, looked at the business case and said, where do they align with those 3-year plans or those 3-year items that we identified? How does it help us to meet those areas of excellence? Are we sure that we are honoring our mission, vision, and the values that we have? So, we kind of looked at it as the whole once we finished it, and really started to look at, yep, this is good, this is not good, and recognize that for us this year, we happen to have an initiative that aligned with each of our longer term plans. And in some cases, we have more than one because of the importance of that area for us in 2021. But I also think that there are times when we're not going to have as many, or we're not going to touch on all areas on our long-term plan, because while they're important to us, the immediate need is not there for that 1 year action. And I think the other thing that was helpful looking at these is, to be really honest, while I said we have some alignment between our 1 year action plans and that long-term plan, truthfully, some of them can live it and really support multiple long-term plans. And I think that's important too, because it shows that I feel like we're maturing as an organization, and there's integration between the things that we're working on, and they're going to support each other. So they're not happening in isolation, and the work is going to, because of that alignment, I think we're going to be stronger with the outcome too. So,
and the nice thing is this gives a visual way to show that alignment of 1 year to 3 to 5 to that area of excellence. And yeah, we could probably debate that some of them might fit better in another bucket. I don't know that that is super helpful. Pick the primary one. But again, if I have to justify it in, or we can't get agreement that even fits, then we should really be asking ourselves, why are we doing this? Something seems off. And this next slide is going to lead into Gina's question. How do you build the opportunity to shift and adjust?
Absolutely. So I think one of the great things that we learned from Gino Wickman's traction model is this concept of quarterly pulsing. So this is built into his suggestion for how you move forward with your traction and vision plan, which is what he calls a strategic plan. And the idea here is that at the beginning of every quarter, you actually stop and you look and say, what did we accomplish last quarter that towards the accomplishment of our 1-year plan? And you kind of name and claim it and you say, yeah, we did this or we didn't do it, and kind of get an idea of where you are as an organization on executing the strategy for the year. And then you actually take time and go and look at the 3-year plan and the 1-year plan, and you walk through each of those items and those definitions, and you say, what about us is the same? What is new and different? What adjustments do we need to make? What do we need to stop? What should we start? And this became very powerful for us last year. See, the question is around, what, like things like COVID. And I will say COVID was important to us. And then I will also say we've had some start and stop with some pretty large regulatory changes in our industry as well, where they're going to be implemented. Oh, no, they're on hold. Oh, they're going to be implemented. Oh, they're going to be on hold. So the pulsing has really helped us to say, what do we need to do or not do right now? What do we have to stop or start? And even if we don't make changes, we are taking the time to ask. And so this is where I think there's a lot of power in this model, because it builds in this opportunity for agility and adjustment. So I really like that. And then once we agree that this is what we're going to do, we say, yes, we're going to keep doing this, or no, we're going to stop. Then we look at those initiatives and we say, okay, what are we going to accomplish in the next 90 days? What are we going to try to accomplish before the next time we do this pulsing? So I think there's a lot of power in this. Yeah.
Awesome. Yep. And again, the quarterly pulsing is really about breaking things into
achievable chunks,
90-day chewable chunks, making that commitment, and it becomes a public commitment because I'm telling my peers, here's what I'm going to accomplish. And if you're not familiar with that psychology, the psychology says I believe it's 3 to 5 times more likely to accomplish something you commit to in public. So just
That's
doing
powerful.
this has this powerful impact to say, yep, I'm going to do this and I'm committing to doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the other thing, and I didn't put together, we didn't talk about talking through the entire thing, but the other element of traction that we've really been using is the idea of level 10 meetings and checking in frequently over those 90 days to talk about progress and whether you're on track or off track with the things that you said you were going to do in those 90 days. So we as a leadership team, I mentioned already, we meet 4 times a month. Well, actually every Tuesday, because sometimes there's 5 Tuesdays in a month. But so basically we meet weekly. And at 2 of those meetings, we specifically go through every initiative on the plan to indicate what action has been taken and whether or not we are on track or off track with what we are trying to accomplish. And again, this is accountability to one another. It's an opportunity to ask questions of what's working, make offers, maybe a request for assistance, and offer for, hey, I heard about this thing, whatever the case might be. It's an opportunity for this dialogue with the senior leader team. And I think it's helpful for that accountability. And I think we've done it in various forms over the years that we've used Traction, the last few years that we've used it. And I think that there's a lot of power in it. And I've just put together, this is kind of a newer piece to us, is this kind of visual dashboard, if you will, but there's every one of our initiatives is on here, and you can see by month. And the gray indicates places where we've said we expect to have wrapped up work on that particular initiative, or this is when we're planning to actually start that initiative. So you can see there are a couple of them where we have agreement as a group that we're not actually going to start work on this until later in the year. And then we have other items where we say we expect to be done. We expect to be done by this the start of the third quarter for a few of these. So it's a nice visual representation. And then where we're on track or off track, we can have some visualization around that. And again, when we say we're not on track, that's a time to say, what help do you need? And so it's been really good. It's been helpful to keep line of sight. It's not a dead document or static. We have accountability to one another, and helping to address that issue of execution and getting the work done. We don't want to have another year of 40% completion.
And it is important that we have this really, really definitive success statement. We can now as a group say, did we hit that? Yes or no? And the red, yellow, green stoplight can really be as simple as, are you on track? So if you look at the fourth one down, that one should be done in May. And we can be talking about, will that be done in May? Will we hit the success statement? Now we shift our focus to other work because we're done. And if we're not done, now we can have a conversation of, well, wait a minute, why is it green all those other months ahead of that?
Yeah, this is an area where, we have always reported, on track, off track, but I think there's a lot of discipline around this and figuring out what does on track mean and what is off track. And I think this year for us, we're giving more information to one another rather than just say on track, off track, which is what the Houtman model really suggests. So this has been really good. It's a change and it's an evolving thing for us. We're still learning and getting comfortable with it, in all honesty, but we're working this way. Yeah. All right. So what are we continuing to learn? Kind of like what are our next steps? I indicated, we are still getting some comfort with what is the success statement? Are we on track, off track? And I think the next step for us is, okay, so like that one plan, it's going to get operationalized. How does that become part of our daily work? And how do we make adjustments once it moves from strategy to operationalize? So we're still kind of in that learning phase and trying to figure out how do we continue cycles of learning once it becomes operationalized. How do we account for capacity in this kind of work that we're doing? Do we have enough people to do these new things, if it is new, in fact, that kind of thing. So I think those are some of the things that we're looking to address. We're still working on getting comfortable with those charters that Scott showed you. We have created some new roles, figuring out team members, understanding how to more effectively utilize them. That is something that we are still learning and growing with. And then I think the last thing is, with the charters, we did talk a whole lot about this, but you identify what your deliverables are. What actions are you taking to help meet the success statement? And you can take action on all the things you said you were going to take action on, and you still might not have the desired outcome you want. And so what does that mean? And what do we do when that happens? And I think we're still I don't think we've gone far enough into the cycle to really know what that impact is and how we are going to respond to it. But we're already sort of starting to ask ourselves that question, and we'll have to figure out how to answer it. So I think those are some of the things that we see as future learnings for us.
Awesome. So I know we're right at time. There are just a couple questions that are in the chat we can answer. And so we'll hang out and be able to do that. So really about the questions are around, what else do you do to hold people accountable, or to keep it going forward and on track to hit deadlines?
Yeah, what do we do? Um, I think it really, the things that we're talking about internally as an organization is saying, we have people who are responsible for the plan, those initiatives on the plan. They report to somebody, we call them the accountable person. They report to the responsible, which is likely the area the item's going to get operationalized. And then we have an executive sponsor. And so the way it works for us is that we have, these reporting out mechanisms. And I think for us at some point, it becomes about, if you're not doing the work or you're not able to do the work, you need to be talking to your person responsible or to the executive sponsor to say, these are the roadblocks that we have, or this is, the challenges that we're facing to not be able to execute. So I think those are the things that we're trying to develop discipline around right now with our plan. And then we haven't talked about if it's a performance issue, and maybe then it becomes a conversation between the person's leader and themselves about why they're not in action. So yeah, I think those are areas of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is the publicness of having that conversation does a little bit of automatic accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Other questions before we wrap up and head to an exciting fireside chat? Very good. Well, Jen, thank you. It was an honor to present with you today and share.
It was great to do it with you. Thank you. It's been a good time.